Hello, and welcome to Once Upon a Mental Crisis, hosted by me, your fairy godmother, Zai Moore. I'm here to guide you through life trials and tribulations with my own personal experiences. Let's travel on this road called life together and figure out how we can find happiness, fulfillment, and empowerment. Hello, welcome back to Once Upon a Mental Crisis, hosted by yours truly, godmother Zai Moore. And here we have sweet little Evie with us. Hi. This is episode 1 of season 6, chapter 31. We're gonna do an overview of my month in January and the glorious things that it brought me. Glorious. Anyways, so going back to January of 2021, that month was a difficult month. Usually, people are just sad because the holidays are over. Christmas ended in December, the new year started in January. I, unfortunately, excuse my comfortability, but I unfortunately started my year of 2021 on a very bad note. And I tried really, really hard to be positive. I did. But at last, I couldn't. So if you listen to my podcast or follow any of my Instagram or Facebook posts at OUMC_podcast, by the way, you would have known that my whole family, on my side of family, caught COVID. So that was my dad, my mom, my two older brothers, my oldest brother's wife, who was also pregnant. So they caught COVID at the end of December. My two brothers, they went over to a friend's house, and unbeknownst to their friend had COVID and had no symptoms. One of the scary things about COVID was that this person had no symptoms, but he was positive in COVID. And because of that, my brothers didn't know, but ultimately, my whole family who lived in that household caught COVID. And my sister-in-law was currently pregnant in December of 2020. And what happened was she was due the week of Christmas. But of course baby came late, and so they scheduled an induction. And the day of induction, the day before induction, my whole family finds out that they all have COVID, including my sister-in-law. So she had to go to the hospital by herself. I believe her mom was there with her, actually, but my brother was not there. And this was their first child together. So you can just imagine how devastating that was. Just being the sister, excuse me, I have to sneeze. Excuse me. So being the sister, it was already really hard for me to see my brother and my sister-in-law not be together on what is supposed to be the most happiest day of their life, other than getting married, of course. So yeah, he had to watch his daughter being birthed through Zoom. And luckily, my sister-in-law didn't have to give birth by herself. Her mom was there. But it would have been probably a lot better if her husband was there with her. So that was how the year ended. And then I don't remember the exact date, but it was either no, it probably was. It was either after the 29th of December, that week of December, or the first week of January, one of those. But basically, I was at home and I was helping my family, and I was getting Mucinex, I was getting them groceries, whatever, that they needed, and I would drop it off at their front door. I would have my face mask and my gloves on, and then I had my like Lysol spray with me, and I'd spray everything down when I gave it to them, and then when I left and got in the car, I sprayed everything down. I am very thankful to say, knock on wood, that I have not caught COVID. I haven't always been cautious, but I did the best that I could during 2020 and 2021. And knock on wood again, thankfully, I have not caught COVID. But yeah, so helping out my family with that. And it was probably the first week of January, probably, that my brother texted everyone and let us know that he was taking Dad to the hospital. And I already had a suspicion that this could happen because, like, just not to my dad, but like my family, because, COVID was so, unknown. I mean, it still kind of is, but it was really, really unknown back then, and we didn't know how it was going to affect anybody. And I was really hoping that they also had the same like condition as their friend, where they had no symptoms, nothing, and they were just positive COVID. Well, no, that was not the case. Almost everybody had mild to severe symptoms, and my dad being the worst. I don't exactly remember what happened to cause them to take my dad to the hospital, other than, I actually remember. So my second oldest brother, he had this thing that measures like your heart rate or your breathing or something. I don't remember what it was, but if you know anything about COVID, then you probably know what I'm talking about. But it was a contraption that the support group of COVID provided people to kind of like take care of themselves and like watch their symptoms and stuff like that. And he had put it on himself, he had put it on our brother and everybody. And then when it came to my dad, it was really dangerous numbers. And if you have traditional parents like I do, my dad did not want to go to the hospital. He was like, once I go to hospital, that's it. I'm not going to get better. They're not going to help me, basically. But us kids were modern. We grew up in America, and our way of thinking is much different. And, we don't know much about the medical field. So it was really hard to convince our dad to go to the hospital. My brother had to call my dad's doctor, and my doctor finally convinced my dad to go to the hospital, even though he didn't want to. That situation is really hard because, for some people, for actually most people, hospitals are very scary. They're very scary, especially in an unknown time that we were in. And I think my dad was very, very scared. We didn't know what was going to happen, but I think the rest of us, other than my dad, we felt very hopeful that he was just going to go in there and then come out a couple days later, because that's usually what happened with my dad. Is he had kidney stones, he had high blood pressure, and he'd go to hospital and then he'd come back, a couple days later. And this is what we were hoping for. So my brother took him to the hospital, and they were there for a little bit, and they wouldn't even let my second oldest brother go in with my dad. My dad went into the hospital by himself, and the next thing I know is I hear from my mom that he's going to stay the night, which isn't that concerning because, again, we're thinking that he's going to get respiratory treatment and that, he's going to get the medication he needs and so on and so on. But one night turned into a week. A week turned into 2 weeks. And then it was a month. So yeah, one night turned into 1 month, and then February started, and every night I would text my brother, do you have an update? What's going on? And it was the same thing. It was either, his oxygen level is going a little higher, so it seems good, but nothing's really changed yet. And that happened for 2 weeks. And then it was February 14th, I believe, one of those days. My brother called and he said that the doctors aren't sure if Dad's gonna make it anymore. And by this time, us kids already knew or had a suspicion that we would need to prepare for a funeral. And being 30 and your dad being 57, you never would have imagined that you would be planning your dad's funeral at this age. But there we were, us kids, mom, the spouses, sitting around the dining room table talking about the next steps if Dad passed away. And I know in my head, as much as I was fighting it, I knew, a part of me just knew that Dad wasn't going to make it. And then February 15th, I went over to my brother's house and Sally had to make the decision to take my dad off life support. I still vividly remember that day. We called all of our family. We called my dad's friend in Thailand. We did a lot of preparations, and then the next day, we all got up, drove to the hospital, said our last words, and the doctor came in, unplugged all the machines, and within a minute, my dad was gone. I haven't talked about my father's passing like this other than to my therapist. And it's still very, very real and hard to talk about. But I know that I need to, because for a long time, I avoided it. I didn't want to talk about it. Even at my dad's funeral, I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to think about it. Because it didn't seem real. It had been almost 2 months since I last saw my dad until I saw him in the hospital. 2 months. And I still think about the last moments I shared with him, the last conversation I had with him. And it was like he always knew that something was going to happen. It was really bizarre now that I think about it. You know, like in 2020 and the years before, he would say, spend as much time with me, as if he just knew or something. His health was declining, but I mean, he was still so active, especially in 2020. Like he built a smokehouse from lumber that he bought at the store and that was left over from something else too. And he had built all these things in 2020 during the pandemic because we couldn't leave the house, so he spent that summer with mom gardening. He built shelves in the garage. He did a lot of things that he did because he had nowhere to go, and he wasn't really, up to health about it, if that makes sense. Like his health was declining, but not to a way that was like really concerning. Yeah. But it was really concerning when COVID came around and then he caught it. And ultimately, of course, it took him. So what happened is he caught COVID, and then COVID turned into pneumonia, and that attacked his lungs a lot. And mom suspects that he had already had some lung issues because he was coughing a lot, and prior to him catching COVID, and he just didn't seem to have a lot of energy, but he still wanted to be energetic. And so he could have had some issues with his lungs already. But yeah, ultimately a lot of damage to his lungs from pneumonia and COVID, and the lungs can't really heal themselves. They try to, but what happens that instead of the lungs returning to what they are, they harden. So lungs are different from other parts of our bodies, like our skin or whatever. If we cut our skin, it'll just scab over and heal. Well, in the lungs, they scab over, but then they stay scabbed over. And if you catch it early enough, the doctors can, remove the scar tissue, and people can survive. People can get, lung transfers. That was an option that we had at some point. But being how old my dad was, and just knowing the person that my dad was, he wouldn't want that. We all remember, us kids and mom, remember him telling us that he didn't want to be on life support. He didn't want to live a life where he couldn't be the person that he wanted to be. And as much as we wanted him to live, and for him to, like, even if he was in a wheelchair, even if he didn't talk to us like he used to, if he was a paraplegic or something, like, we would have rather him, stay with us, and we would take care of him. My mom would have quit her job and she would take care of him. And, my parents were living with my oldest brothers already, so he would have housed them and taken care of them. But my dad didn't want that. No. He wanted a life where he could do things, because that was the person that he was. He always loved going on adventures and hiking and traveling, and if he couldn't do that, then he wouldn't want it at all. And we didn't really have that option, because, like I said earlier, February 16th, I don't remember the time, but it was in the morning, and watching them, pull out, all those IVs and prepping him, and then unplugging, and then feeling his chest slowly decrease, and it became quiet. I knew the moment that he passed. Do I regret being beside my dad while he passed away? No, I don't. It was very scary at that time. Very, very scary and sad. But I would not redo that moment. I mean, I would do if he lived, but I don't regret being there next to my dad. I remember holding his hand. It was a lot thicker and bloated because of all the liquid going in his body. But he was warm. I remember how warm his hand was, and then how cold it got afterwards. I remember seeing his face and just thinking how strange he looked, but he was definitely my dad. that image of him being in the hospital on that bed and passing away is still in my memory. But it's not the only image that I see. I will admit that it took a lot of us, my whole family, a long time to get that image out of our head, meaning, where we didn't think about it constantly every day. But that memory is forever ingrained in us. We just know to see him in a more positive and loving way. And for me, what overlaps the image of my dad passing away is my dad smiling. I remember hiking with my dad. I remember all the trips we went together. I remember traveling with him for a whole month in the Midwest and the South. I remember birthdays. I remember his laughter. I even remember the bad times we had together, where we fought, where we cried. It's very all bittersweet. But that was my dad. I can't just think of him as that person who passed away. I have to remember him as the person who influenced me, who created me, who allowed me to live and breathe, and who gave me a life. And that's how I move forward. Grieving never ends. I'm recording this in December, and it's gonna be his death anniversary in 2 months. 1.5 months. And thinking about it, I don't feel much except for just anticipation. But I know that the moment that day comes, it's gonna be a very hard day. That was my month of January.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope I was able to give you a little sense of clarity, peace, and encouragement for you to do what you need to do to be where you want to be. If you're feeling lost or unsure, or you just need reassurance, feel free to reach out to me on any of my platforms. I'm located on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, or you can email me at xymorecoaching@gmail.com. That's X as in xylophone, A as in apple, I as in igloo, more coaching at gmail.com. I'm always here to give you your little glass slipper and that gentle push. Until next time, have a great rest of your week, and don't forget that you can do anything.